Welcome back to The Connection Effect. I'm Bill Groner. If you haven't yet listened to last week's episode with Dr. Jane Dutton, I'd encourage you to start there because what we're about to do is something a little different. This is the Aftershow, where a few of us sit down to do what Jane's work is really all about, connect. We unpack what landed, what surprised us, and what we're actually going to do differently because of it. Today I'm joined by three amazing colleagues and fellow MAP alumni. That's the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program that you've heard me talk about in the past. Gaia, Harry, and Eileen. We each came to this episode with different lenses, and I think that's going to make for a rich conversation. Harry is going to take us through it. Harry, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Bill. Excited to have this discussion. We all were introduced to Dr. Dutton through our classwork, as you said. And I would say among the speakers that we heard who were the most referenced in conversations along the way, and even conversations since, I think this term of a high-quality connection keeps coming up again and again. And then Bill, the Positive Connection Institute actually has the word connection in it. So this had to be a really powerful conversation for you, too, talking about connections. So for veterans of listeners to the Aftershow, I always throw the first question to you, is to first, what led you to pick Jane to join the podcast? And then what did it feel like while you were having that conversation?
Well, my capstone work in connection and my subsequent work with the workshops and the Positive Connection Initiative is everything connection. Connection to self, connection to others, even connection to nature and the arts and community. But what's fascinating is that there's very few scientists out there that have taken a piece of that and studied it exhaustively. And that's what Jane has done. She's taking a piece, which is a micro connection, and she studied it and has scientific validity. So for me, it was an absolute honor and a pleasure to have a conversation with her.
Mm-hmm. I am excited to hear from everybody. If you go back to when you started the discussion in that episode with Jane, she defined a high-quality connection for us in a really simple way, a small micro interaction between two people that leaves them better off. And we're going to get into the intricacies of what that means. But I thought we'd maybe all just begin with what is an example of and I'm going to use the acronym, so let's just get that out of the way. I will say HQC, which it was funny to hear Jane get a kind of a giggle out of the fact that something that she worked on is now it's acronym worthy, which I think that is kind of a litmus test for being a big deal for that matter. But what's an example of an HQC that maybe you've had, or what's your personal take on this micro interaction that leaves both people better off?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. You know, it didn't hit me until, quite honestly, right now. And I love her work. I'm with you, Bill, and Harry and Gaia. All of us, I know, love Jane's work. What I think is particularly powerful is that they're high-quality connections that aren't necessarily with people you've had deep relationships with. Most often it's not. And I think in a world where we're really working through high loneliness and people feeling socially disconnected, it makes it so much more accessible. And when we can think of the impact on our well-being, even with those high-quality connections at the grocery store, Bill, I know you use that example at the grocery store, in line, in work environment. There are little things that we can do that really can boost us, even if we're not feeling like we have all those deep friendships or connections. So I love the accessibility, and that really hit me, particularly in the moment we're living in.
I love that point, Eileen. And for me, I thought of a really specific example. Yesterday, I was at a celebration of life, which is a heavy event, but it's also one where you're strength spotting somebody or a community in a really beautiful way. And the person whose life we were celebrating was an artist and very much a community-oriented person. And I happened to see a man who ran the New England Youth Theater, Stephen Stearns. And I spent a lot of time there when I was growing up as a kid, and I haven't seen him in many, many years. So we had this moment where we got to chat, we got to connect, and he told me he's now writing a book about establishing the New England Youth Theater, the history, what they went through, and even hearing from alumni and maybe some things that the adults didn't know about. And in that moment, I said, I had my first kiss at the New England Youth Theater. And he looked at me like, scandalized. This is the juicy kind of thing that we're looking for. And that was a vulnerable moment for me. There was certainly a little bit of trust there that I felt like I could share that with him, because it's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of scandalous. But at the same time, a couple minutes later, we'd been talking for a little while, and he says, I know your face, I know your eyes, I know your heart, but I don't know your name. Will you please remind me? And that was vulnerable on his part too. So in listening to this episode and in reflecting back, I was like, wow, that was a moment where we both felt uplifted. Maybe we shared something that we wouldn't have otherwise and left us better off.
Terrific, Gaia. And I can picture the facial expression when you shared that news too about your first kiss.
His eyes went super wide.
Gaia, how long was that conversation?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah. Which I think is a great takeaway, that this, the word micro came up a number of times as Bill and Jane were talking, and to know like this doesn't take that much time to create the impact that we talked about.
Absolutely. And when you think about why it was significant or why it felt like a high quality connection moment and not just an everyday interaction, we had direct eye contact. We were listening to each other. We had this element of light vulnerability, not sharing a ton in a small amount of time, and this mutuality where we were both adults in this situation. I think he has a beautiful way of creating mutuality even with kids. But in this situation, I was now at his level instead of being the student and him the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Harry, I want to pick up on what you just mentioned about the time.
Mm-hmm.
I generally, when I'm out and about, I'm engaging with everybody I can. I'm an energy in, energy out guy, and part of the way, I get enough energy to be me is really interact with people. But what's really cool, and I've been looking at this lately, is when I walk around, when I'm in the city or really anywhere, and I say hello to somebody, I find that there's almost 3 variations. One is you say hello, and I say hello to almost every stranger I see. And you say hello, but there's not much of an eye contact. And I'm not feeling that connection. I feel like I was being polite. Then on the other extreme, there's super long eye contact. And I think that could be a little creepy, right? I mean, nobody wants to have that extra long eye contact, because then you're trying to understand what's going on here, and you could feel uncomfortable. But there's a middle ground, which I'm fascinated about, and I watch myself and whether or not I did a short, middle, or long. And that medium ground is that extra second where you're saying hello and you're looking at them, and just for that one moment, you're both really feeling connected. You feel like you belong. There's no words that need to be spoken. And I love finding that sweet spot. And that takes a second. And you could put a bunch of those together any day that you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even thinking of time and then setting as well. I mean, Gaia, your story is from a funeral, which is not necessarily where you'd expect something like that to happen. And Eileen, I'm going to turn it over to you, but first I can't miss this opportunity, Bill, since you mentioned the word creepy. HCC is a highly creepy connection, and that's not what we'll be talking about today. That's a whole other line of research. So, all right, Eileen.
Although I will say though, my kids, when they were younger, and my wife is also a high quality connector, when we would go out to dinner, we would often, look at the people the next table over and start a conversation. Mm-hmm. Oh, how are you enjoying your veal? Or, how old is your baby or something? And our kids would totally get creeped out by it. And I could understand that. they thought we were breaking boundaries. And I think you do have to be careful when you're engaging with strangers as to whether or not you are breaking that boundary, where there's a discomfort by them or just is the wrong circumstance to do that.
But I think there's almost a generational shift in that, because Bill, we used to do that too, or my dad used to always do that when we'd be out for dinner. I would do the same, and our kids would cringe. But I think there's almost a generational thing, like, that's not cool to do that anymore to somebody, but I still do it. I'm like, whatever, that's just me. But I was going to say, Bill, you brought up something about looking people, in the eye and just saying hello, what have you. And I just got off of doing a bunch of talks down in Mexico. And one thing that I do, and it's often the same people who show up, it's 5 successive talks. And then sometimes there's new people in the room. And often there's new people in the room, actually. And I start every talk, and it doesn't matter, quite honestly, if it is 15 people in the room or 30 people. I ask a question and I go around the room and I look at each person in the eye to hear what they're saying so that I can connect with them. And I do it specifically so that I see them and there is that, mutual regard and the positive regard, I should say. And then that it's vulnerable because they need to share it, something simple, but I also want their voice in the room so that they become part of this community. And it shifts everything. And it's funny, I talked to some other presenters that do the same thing. They don't do that. They do the same type of talks at the same place where I talk. They said, I never do that. There just isn't time for it. I'm like, to me, it's like the most important thing I do of the entire talk is to have them feel valuable and part of this community that we have built together. And it's amazing how they then connect after, how they share. And it's just by looking at them, having everybody else look at them, and hearing each other's voice. So you can do it in a group setting too, is the point.
And you're making time for it, Eileen.
Yeah. It's important.
It becomes a priority. Eileen, just to build on that, before my executive coach days, I was leading a department, and we would get together annually. And the first 2 hours of every annual meeting, because we had a large virtual team, so it was the only time of the year that everyone was together, we called it speed networking. And it was 2 or 3 minutes, and you would shift chairs, and it really had a speed dating vibe. But we didn't say speed dating because that would have been highly creepy. But we were creating, without knowing the terminology or even knowing the definitions that we'll talk about in just a second here, I was attempting to create HQCs for the group at the beginning of the meeting. And when we did it, it just changed the energy of the remaining time that we had.
It does.
All right, let's dig into a deeper definition of an HQC. And Bill and Jane spent a majority of the episode then breaking down the 3 main components: positive regard, vitality, and mutuality. And so we'll start with positive regard. And I really liked, Bill, when you and Jane started here, you really left an impression on me as a listener that, this positive regard space, did you feel that you saw each other positively, actually created kind of a birthing moment for you of some of the work that you were doing. And you described that conversation you had with a student during a dialogue workshop. So this is one time, Bill, where I'm going to throw it to you to just maybe expand a little bit on that moment. And then I'm curious for all of us, just what does positive regard look like for you? And what gets in the way of bringing it naturally?
For me, positive regard is almost identical to respect. And in this context, mattering. And I know we all love Isaac Prolotensky's work on mattering. It's just that when people speak, they're important. What they have to say is important. And you care. And even if they're not speaking, if they're in your presence, you look at them as a person that's as important to the universe as you are. And I think a lot of us walk around, it's like, and you look at roles and you look at categories. And, if you're an office worker and you look at the person who's the custodian, do you look at them with a sense that they're equal to you, that they're as important to the world as you are? that their thoughts, feelings, beliefs are as important. I think engaging with people, either looking at them or talking to them with a sense that that person's importance is as great to the universe as yours is, sort of sets that tone of mattering and respect and positive regard.
What gets in the way of that, Bill, for you? Like I see you almost, exclusively bringing positive regard to discussions I've had with you. But I'm curious as to what can keep you from bringing that.
Well, I think certainly anything that creates emotion, brings you out of that reasonable mindset. And so if you're having a difference of agreement, then, your brain is going to start saying things like, oh, well, they didn't do this, so therefore their opinion doesn't have the same merit. That sort of emotional protective element. So certainly emotions are, I think, for me, the biggest obstacle.
Something that is a little difficult for me to separate is positive regard and mutuality in this case. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing a lot of that in what Bill is saying too, and truly believing that what other people have to offer is equally as important as what you're bringing to the table. And it makes me think of my grandfather, who would always remind everybody in his life in Spanish, and then I'll translate it into English.
Love it.
Tú no eres ni más ni menos de ninguna otra persona, which means you are not more or less than anybody else. And he was a doctor, and he came from very little. So he had both perspectives in his life of being what the world would consider a small person and being what the world would consider a big person. And he kept that as a really core part of who he was and how he lived his life. And in that, it gives you some space to, one, assume good intent from other people. Two, it gives you the ability to do strength spotting in others and see the goodness in them. And it also reminds you that you never know what someone else is going through. So you might as well be nice to them.
I like it. Gaia, can you give us an expanded definition of strength spotting?
Strength spotting is when you see someone at their best or in their daily life doing what they are naturally good at. For us, we tend to work with the VIA classification of strengths that we talk about a lot in MAP, but it doesn't have to be. You can see someone doing something kind for someone else and just call it out. Hey, I saw that, and that was a really nice thing to do. Or another version of strength spotting is if you are positively gossiping about someone with a friend, with a loved one, it's okay to tell that person that you positively gossiped about them. In fact, they might really love to hear it. I think both of those are strength spotting.
I like a new term there, positively gossip. I've not used that term before, and now I will.
I think that one's from Leona.
That's great.
It sounds Leona-ish.
Eileen, I want to hear a little bit from you on this too, but Gaia, a quick follow-up on your grandfather, because that statement's really sticking with me. Where do you think that came from for him?
I think it came from his life journey. I said he did not come from a lot and became a doctor, and I'm underselling him in this situation. He actually became the leader of the first surgical team to lead a successful transplant in Central and South America. Wow. He was a big deal. He wrote medical.
It's kind of a big deal.
He was really a big deal. And throughout his journey, in coming from nothing to growing into the man that he became, he knew what it was like to be on the bottom. He knew what it was like to not be taken seriously. And so he made an effort to treat everybody, whether it was his patients or otherwise, with all the respect and all the regard in the world. And he showed it through his actions as well. So when he would go on vacation with my family, he would bring medical supplies and helpful drugs with him. And Wow. He would see patients all day on vacation for free because he felt like he held that same respect to the local people of the coastal communities as he did for his patients in the city, regardless of their finances, regardless of their ability to access medical treatment. He wanted everybody to know that they were not more or less than anybody else.
Wow.
Harry, I want to say Gaia started out by saying something really important about mutuality and positive regard, because mutuality sounds like what her grandfather was all about and what I was trying to describe, which is that we feel that we're equal to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a big overlap, because what that does is it sets the table for respect. And then the interaction that's born from respect has a lot of care. And actually, Jane talked about the word love, right? So I think that feeling that we're all equal and that I respect you sets the table for the positive regard, which is really more of that positive emotion and that care. And, I don't like to use the word love too much because I feel like I'm turning people off, but I do feel connection is love, mutuality is love, respect is love. And, you can see why the Beatles, when they became more powerful than anybody on the planet, basically said the answer is love. All you need is love. It seems square, but I come back to it over and over again, especially the older I get.
Eileen, I hear you use the word love quite a bit, in that you love it, or people are lovely. That comes naturally, though, for you, I imagine.
Yeah, it's funny. It does come naturally. I don't know why, but I do. And I just recently, I don't think we've released it yet, but I had Marcus Buckingham on my podcast recently, and his new book is all about organizations, and organizations are loveless. And we need to bring love into organizations and talk about love, because we don't, as a society, it's not embraced unless you're in a loving relationship with somebody who's a family member or a very dear friend. But I have so much love for the people who I just meet, just as humans. And that connection, I guess, being on the human journey together is something to feel love for others.
Where does that come from for you?
I would say definitely my parents. I love Gaia. I love hearing about your grandfather, and I so wish he and my dad would have met each other. My dad also being a physician who, there's an earthquake in Guatemala. He's flying to Guatemala to, help the people who are in dire need, and patients who came to him who couldn't afford it. Was like, that wasn't an issue. It was, how can I serve you? How can I help you? So I think it was part of my upbringing, and this expectance, that's not the word I'm looking for, but I guess our family value was, we're all on this human journey together. We are one. We are, love is the answer. My dad used to also say that acceptance is the highest form of love. And so how do we accept other people? And I think, I saw it in my mom as well. Again, going back to what Bill was saying, talking to people in the line, my mom would have the UPS person literally sending her photos of his family, because she got to know his wife, who had a hard time having a child, and finally they had a kid. So she would get all the Christmas cards. So it's connecting with your everyday people, because we're all on this journey together. And to your grandfather's point, nobody is better, nobody is less. And the more we can love one another, and it was just part of our family values, I guess, at the end of the day.
I'm having a hard time differentiating between positive regard and mutuality, and I don't know if anybody else is too. I'm hearing I'm feeling like mutuality is related to humility, in allowing for even playing field in terms of a relationship. And I'm hearing in positive regard more of the acceptance element of it, and maybe assuming good intent. I'm curious if anybody else has had a hard time differentiating the two positive regard and mutuality, or what you all think.
I could maybe get us started there, Gaia, because I think it is a good question. So first, I'm with you. I think all three of the components of an HQC complement and overlap a little bit. And when you give examples, I think any good example of an HQC, we could find pieces of all three in that same example that you give. I go back to those questions that Jane would have given to Bill at the beginning of the episode. So for positive regard, the question was, did you feel that you saw each other positively? And then she even used that term loving eyes. And it gets us into the micro moments of just paying attention, direct eye contact, some of the things that we were talking about in our example. The question for mutuality was, did you feel you were equally responding to each other? And then when Bill and Jane dug into it, they talked a lot about adjusting to the other. And she gave the example of probably hierarchy is what I picked up on, like in an organization, if someone's the boss and the other is a subordinate. In a classroom, is someone the teacher, is someone the student? And then finding ways to make that, make each other feel that they're at an equal level is what I talked about, or what's really stuck with me. That actually, Gaia, was a question I was going to bring to the conversation when we talk about mutuality. If I come in thinking we are at different levels, it may be harder for me to generate the same type of energy that you get from an HQC. And so being mindful of that, I think, is key. And so the question I was going to ask everyone is, how do you adjust to any perceived difference? It could be age, it could be experience, it could be rank, it could be gender, it could be anything that creates difference. How do you adjust when you deal with someone?
I love Gaia's word humility. I don't care what your education background is, what your socioeconomic status. Everybody has thoughts, beliefs that are true, they're valid, and they're based on experience. And I think if you go into interactions, understanding and respecting that, their thoughts are as important to them as yours are to you and are as valid, that you can sort of get past this, well, we are different, and what does that mean?
So, Bill, I'm going to put you on the spot for the fun of it, because that's what we do on the Aftershow. So, Bill, everyone who has a lot of humility about him, just received an honorary doctorate at the commencement of his undergrad alma mater.
Wow.
Insert applause here.
That's huge. Congratulations.
Thank you.
He has written a book. He has started a nonprofit. He's had a successful career. He's made a huge difference for first responders after 9/11. So, Bill, I know your humility makes this a difficult question. So thanks for going here with us. But I know that you do things that help people maybe get past. If they knew everything about you, they may feel intimidated. And I know you wouldn't want that. But my question to you is, what are things you think you do to help then bring mutuality when you have a conversation with someone?
What a great question. And I think the answer is simple. I'm just enormously curious about them.
Okay.
I don't like to make the conversation about me or the things that I've achieved. I'd rather it be about them as a person, me as a person, and who we are today, and the things we're going through in life. And there's such commonality there. And there's, so to me, starting in that direction, and I generally just get very engaged by asking them a lot about themselves. And then it just goes from there. And we get out of who Bill Groner is and what has he achieved. And just, I'm the person right across from you. And I'm genuinely interested. I mean, gosh, the older I get, the more I realize I don't know and the more I want to learn. And every person is an opportunity for growth and learning. I mean, it's just, they're just a wealth, a fountain of knowledge and experience. So I am, truly fascinated to speak to everybody that I possibly can about really anything.
That is great. Eileen and Gaia, build on that a little bit. What do you see in people that just brings that mutuality right to the table?
I would say, so when I do a talk on connection, and one of the things when I'm looking at clients or and myself or friends, I have a model called Riser. I don't need to go through the whole thing, but the very first one is reveal. And that goes right back to the mutuality and the vulnerability and showing up authentically. And I think when you feel, or when I feel like someone is holding back, then I don't feel that connection or that closeness. And so flip the script for myself. I'm happy to show where I've fallen, where I'm struggling, where I am not on the top of my game. That happens a lot, right? We're human. Mm-hmm. So all of us are messy humans. And so I show my messy side because I think it's really easy when we're showing up to try to show up buttoned up. And the reality is, think about it right now. Would you want to spend all your time with someone who is buttoned up 24/7 or somebody who is just real, authentic, and messy? I prefer the latter.
I love the phrase "perfect is boring."
Yeah, that's what I always talk about. People strive for perfection, and now pause. Do you want perfect friends? Nobody wants perfect friends. So why are you striving for perfection? Because then no one wants to hang with you. So let it go.
For my own answer on this question of what situations, or is it difficult to adjust? What do you do in order to adjust? I think authenticity plays a really big role here. The more you can really be you and not that buttoned up version that Eileen mentioned really goes a long way. I think this does require some context dependence because not everybody wants the less buttoned up version of you all the time. So I think in professional context, sometimes it makes more sense to be more guarded, more buttoned up and not showing all of yourself. And that's hard for me because I think I'm more naturally inclined to show all of myself or who I really am. And something that's really interesting for me is I have this background where I've been told that I'm not more or less than anybody else. And so I carry that with me in my life. So I have this tendency to be a little bit disarming to people who might be really comfortable in hierarchy because I don't care about it as much. I'm not interested in it. So some of the professors or bosses that I've had that are so steeped in hierarchy might meet me, and it can go one or two ways. One potential way is they meet me and they're kind of down for my lack of seriousness and my lack of respect for hierarchy, or they're really not. And that's been a trickier situation for me in the past and ultimately felt like it wasn't the right fit for me.
I think it's a great point, Gaia, and good to know, like even from an organizational sense, what are the barriers that exist? And then how do you navigate them, which takes us in a whole different direction of maybe culture and politics and things like that. Before we go, though, as we kind of approach the end, I want to just briefly touch on the third component because we haven't got a chance to talk about it, which is vitality. So vitality is that I can sum it up best with the question that Jane gave to Bill, which is, did you feel more alive? Did you feel energized after the connection? And Jane really went into even some of the biological impacts of connection too. And we had referred, and Eileen, I think you'd referred to loneliness when we started here, and just knowing that loneliness is really a global issue right now is how do you coach someone to, especially someone battling loneliness, to how to access this energy of vitality that comes from HQCs?
I think Honestly, I'd go back to where I started, and it's having these micro connections, these, just even stopping in the market. Again, going back to Bill, and it's what I saw my parents constantly doing. What I do is stopping to say, how's your day? What's going on? What's good today? Something where you connect with somebody else. So it's extending yourself. And it could be even playing with it on, who wants to be on the phone with a service agent for the airlines, but maybe play with it. You have a lot of opportunity once you get on that call and you're going back and forth. So even playing with saying, how am I going to light up in this moment on this call? That is my goal, is to, feel a little more alive. And how do I play with this person on the other line? So if you aren't feeling connected maybe to your greater world, maybe use those little micro moments that could feel like busy work or drudgery, calling the airline or, standing in line at the post office, things no one wants to do, and say, I'm going to use this as a personal challenge to light my life up.
I like it. The energy is there, right? And it's unlimited in nature too. Yeah. I think for me,
how can I create it?
For me, I know a barrier is just my smartphone. And I really have I've realized that when the smartphone comes up, it's almost a wall to being in the moment with the possibility for an HQC that exists. To Gaia, you're nodding as I say that.
I've noticed that when people take their phone out, everybody else will take their phone out too. It's almost like a reason to mutually disengage from each other. And I think having headphones in can do the same if you're walking down the street. I'm not saying you have to have your headphones out all the time or you have to be fully present with everybody all the time. It's just noticing that it can take away from that. And for this question of how to access the energy of vitality for someone who's struggling with loneliness, there's a really great question from Dr. Lawrence Edwards in a previous episode, which was, who showed you kindness recently? If you stop and think about it, it might have been a really tiny moment that Eileen was speaking to. And those really tiny moments can add up. And if that doesn't work for you, you could try the exercise of a gratitude letter. That might be for a little bit of a deeper connection. And if that doesn't work for you, maybe you can get a sense of connection from nature. So not people. I remember there was a night that my partner was invited to a work party that I was not invited to. And I was sitting on the beach 100 feet away from where this work party was happening that I wasn't invited to. And I was sitting there feeling lonely. And I looked up and I saw the most beautiful full moon. And I looked over my shoulder and I saw a hermit crab. And I said to myself, well, I might not be at the party, but I'm hanging out with my friends, the moon and the hermit crab. And that worked for me in the moment because I felt like, wow, I'm having the best night ever. I get to hang out with the moon and the hermit crab.
We'll do a special after show about how to have HQCs with hermit crabs.
Hermit crabs, yeah.
With Gaia and Bill, that'll be later. Hey, we need to close up. Unfortunately, this conversation is turning into one series of extended HQCs. And that the energy from that makes it hard to bring it to a close. But what I want to do, and I'm going to go around the room, and Bill, I'll finish with you, but maybe just get some thoughts on what's one thing you plan to do after doing a little bit of a deeper look at this conversation that Bill had with Jane Dutton as we've talked about HQCs, knowing that it can be difficult to sustain the mindset that can help you not miss this opportunity, even if it's with the moon and a hermit crab. What can you do different moving forward, even knowing that it's pretty clear from today's conversation that we all are kind of geared to this concept of an HQC? And Eileen, I'll start with you.
I would say, and this is going to go off of what Gaia said, and I'm fresh off of this retreat in Mexico where I mentioned where I had been speaking. And one of the beautiful things is they have very little Wi-Fi. So you do, and phones are really, you're not allowed to go walking around with your phone, chatting on it, texting, what have you. So you pretty much don't see phones at all while you're there. there is so much, I'm going to say high quality connections, but that turn into deep relationships over time. And so leaving the phone behind, or at least not pulling it out, is something that as I leave there, I was just there a week ago, it's being so conscious of when I use the phone. And I'll finish this one sentence or this one thought with, I had the privilege of walking John Hellawell with Niels, a colleague of ours, back to his hotel after we were all together. John Hellawell was one of the key researchers, authors of the World Happiness Report. And I asked him, I said, if there is one thing we can do differently that's really simple, what would you suggest? And he said, when you get in an elevator, look up, look at the people in the elevator and say hello. And it's so simple. And so I'm going to challenge myself to keep doing that, as well as don't take out the phone when I'm waiting in a doctor's office. Look around, say hello. Or a doctor's office, or wherever I am.
Wherever it might be.
I don't just live in doctor's offices. Wherever I am, don't pull out the phone when you have dead time. Instead, use it for a possible connection.
That's great. Thanks, Eileen. Gaia, how about you?
I'm going to bring humility with me and really work on that as a skill.
Terrific. I know for me, I tend to smile a lot, which I think is my way of saying hello. Smile and make eye contact. And I think staying focused on that is important. And what I mean by that is that it can be easy for my mind to wander to the past, to the future. And this concept of just staying in the moment, I think that is when I'm at my most HQC grounded space. And just being mindful of that, I think, is important. Bill, before I ask you, though, I didn't want to miss a chance to say that here I am talking about HQCs with three people who I think are role models for me. I would say, Gaia, whenever we talk, the positive regard I feel, that I am never in doubt that you are wondering about what's best for me. Eileen, when I talk to you, I think of vitality, and there is a way of the energy you bring to a conversation that makes me feel energized. It raises, if you're raising the tide for everyone, I think we could all agree that you do that from an energy perspective. And I know that I will be more energized after dealing with you. And then Mr. Groner, I know that there is no doubt that no matter where you are going to or where you've been from, that when we talk, you give a shit about what I am giving a shit about. And that mutuality, no matter what is on your mind or what task is next, is really apparent to me. And so I appreciate all three of you for certain. And Bill, we do want to hear yours, though, and just say thanks for creating a great conversation and having a terrific episode with Jane to inspire us.
Thanks, Harry. And another exemplary job in facilitating conversation. And Eileen and Guy, it was just fabulous to interact with you guys. And I loved hearing you guys muse about, these issues. For me, in terms of something that I'm going to take away and work on, I'm regularly having HQCs, but I don't think I'm having the awareness of them and the appreciation after they're happening. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that, because there is a vitality I know that I'm having. And if we're not aware of it, then we're losing some of the benefits of it. Sort of that being mindful and more being in the moment after these HQCs is something I'm going to work on. And to our audience, Jane talked about just a 10% shift in one's awareness about having HQCs can change your trajectory of your life, literally. And that's not a big ask. So it's really noticing just a little bit more, being present more, treating the next person you encounter as someone worth seeing. I'd recommend to our audience, try it this week and tell us what happened. You can find us on connection.net/Substack. That's where our community lives between these episodes. Share a story, ask a question, just Let us know how this resonated, and we read everything. And thank you for being here and following us in this journey. We'll see you in the next episode of The Connection Effect.
Yay!
Now do we get to tell Harry what we see in him?